I'd like to welcome everybody to the Robert G. McKinnon Council Chambers, Tuesday, January 10th, 2017, Southbridge School Committee and Southbridge Town Council joint meeting. Moving on to Pledge of Allegiance. All rise.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Moving on to agenda item number 3, public input. Would anybody like to address the Southbridge School Committee at this time? Please go to the podium, state your name and address. Can we call for roll call first, please?
You want to do roll call?
Oh, yeah, we've got roll
Sorry
call.
about that.
Mr. Bishop, Ms. Duval, Mr. Lazo,
Here.
Dr. Page,
Present.
Ms. Peliquin,
Excused.
Mr. Tomo, Mr. Wang. Present. 6 present, 1 excused from the school committee.
Thank you.
Councilor Auclair,
Present.
Councilor Carrasco,
Present.
Councilor Clements,
Present.
Councilor DePietro, Councilor Estrada,
Present.
Councilor McKenzie,
Excused.
Councilor Manna,
Excused.
Councilor Steves,
Present.
Councilor Vecchia,
Excused.
6 present, 3 excused.
Thank you.
Continue.
Can't hear you.
Just talk. They'll fix it in the back.
For those of you guys that do not know me, my name is Dennis Snyder. I am a member of your community. I've lived in Celebration for 4 years now. I've also taught at Southbridge Middle High School for 4 years. I come to you not as an educator, not as an employee of Southbridge Middle High School. I come to you as a human being, one that has a concern. My concern is that we have people up here, and the reason that there's so many people here today, because 2 adults that have such influence over this town are working against each other as opposed to together. We, as stated in the article by Mr. Lazo, are using these kids as a petri dish for our own views, to feed our own egos. And the ones that are suffering are the children. And you may not understand this because you are not a child and you're not suffering with them. But every single day, they are living what we create for them. We can't have a battle of egos. If we're going to say, put these kids first, we need to actually put these kids' needs first. And the first way to do that is to actually have their opinion valued. Is to actually have their opinion valued. The kids have the answers to everything that you guys are going in circles about. And they see it as something that's very simple. And when you tell them, we can't do that, they only respond, why? Because they don't understand the complexity of what we adults are going through. We are living in all of our illusions right now. Some people judge me based off of my clothes, thinking that my intelligence is a reflection of what I am wearing, which is not true. I am here to tell you, you have created, both of you, the people that are in charge now and before, an environment of fear. You're trying to control these children, and you're trying to control the faculty out of fear. You cannot effectively control people using fear. You have to do it out of love. If you control people out of fear, then they have no positive inspiration to do the right thing. Their inspiration is to not get in trouble with their school or not get in trouble with the parents. If you do this, you cannot do that. We are conditioning them to only seek the reward and not the benefit for them. When you create an environment that is based off of love, you accept all
all of these kids' emotions and all of their history and all of their cultures, and we can all start to converge to do the right thing. I agree that we are cooking data. Anybody who is mentally here knows that. We are putting on a facade right now, and we can't put on a facade because those kids' tears that look at me in the eye and trust me as the only trusted adult in their life, that's not a facade. The situations that these kids go back to every single day, that's not a facade. When they tell you, I can't apply this to my life, sorry, that's not a facade. This is real. We need to change what we're doing here because we're operating out of fear. We need to change this idea of I can prove that the school is better using data. And let's change that thought. Let's get the morale of our children. Let's get the morale of our teachers. And let's try to base the change off that. Are these kids happy to come to school? Are they looking forward to coming to school, or are they fearing coming to school? Is the only reason they're coming to school because literally the state can take them if they don't. We do have a lack of discipline, and anybody who walks through the hallways can see that. As much as your first-hand perspective is very important, people put on a facade for you too because you're the boss. The second-hand information that Mr. Lazo's getting is probably a little bit more valid because it's not when the receiver's there. When she's there, we want to look great. But when no one's watching, that's when you see the realest of the things. There are a lot of issues that are happening right now, and we need to address them out of love. If you have a teacher who's not doing well, as much as they might not have the right to be in front of those kids, we hired them. And we have the obligation to coach them. Give them coaching. If they need help, help them. Instead of firing them, you're throwing away the problem instead of finding the cure to the problem. These guys need help. We need a more diverse staff. Mr. Chester says that we have a good idea of the culture. No, we don't. We reject the culture. We reject the culture immediately. Most of our teachers are not aware of the situation in town. We have an ELL director who's an amazing person. I think you're very dedicated, and I appreciate you wherever you are. But you can't have a meaningful conversation with the kids that you're responsible for. We need people that can speak la idioma de nuestros estudiantes, tú sabes? It's so mind-bogglingly simple that it's somewhat infuriating. If we want to actually make a positive change, we need to listen to these kids. If you get them in a room and you hear them actually telling you what's going on, then they will give you the answers. The ones that are having the snide remarks while I'm talking, the ones that are chuckling, you don't get it right now, and that's okay. You might never get it. But somebody's going to hear me, and somebody's going to be inspired by me, and I appreciate everybody for listening, and I hope that my words will be taken for the message and not the way that they were delivered, because that's the intention. I don't come to you as the Malcolm X that comes up and says, you know, everybody's the devil. I come as the Malcolm that came back from Mecca preaching, let's all come together. And you might not understand that, and that's okay. Eventually, we're going to get there, as long as we believe and we have the right people. Those of you guys that are nodding your heads and feeling me, I appreciate you so much. Everybody else, thank you.
There's a 5-minute rule. I don't make.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know.
But you went beyond the 5 minutes.
Okay.
We can extend your time if you need more time.
If that's okay.
There has to be a motion on the floor to extend this time.
So moved. Take on.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
So
Opposed?
when we have these like, for example, observations in our room, I've been here for 4 years. We have not had one person in my classroom ask a student in Spanish how they're doing. How may I help you? ¿Tú entiendes la materia ahí? ¿Sí o no? Nobody. So we can look at these scores, which are slightly irrelevant, because if you have a kid who's a genius who comes here and takes an MCAS the first, second year of learning a language, and then the state says your scores are low, of course they're low. It's in a language that he does not, or she does not master yet. I've taken the Park exam in Spanish. I'm a math teacher. I got a 70-something%. Would you say that I am that smart mathematically? No, of course not. I did Calc 3, I got an A. I have a mathematics degree from Nichols College. So what we're doing is we're letting our numbers take away from our reality. The reality of this is that we're having ego battles, and until you guys learn humility and accept the humbleness of learning from kids, we're going to be in the same situation. Thank you so much for your time. I love you all.
Thank you. Again, there's a 5-minute rule, and we can extend it. We extend it for another 2 minutes if somebody else would like to speak. Does anybody else would like to address the school?
My name is Jacqueline Ryan. I live on Denison Drive. So I rise because I was a little concerned when I was, we all, I'm sure in this room, saw that article that came out in the Telegram in December about the 28 teachers who were warned that they may be terminated if their practices don't change. So when I read that article, it left me with a lot of questions, and naturally, I wanted answers. So I started feeling out. I knew a couple of teachers in the community, and what I was hearing was a little disturbing, to put it bluntly. One of the conversations I ended up having was, I ended up hearing that a couple of the teachers are either very close to retirement or retiring this year. And this made me start questioning, is this being done because we're getting rid of bad teachers? Or is this being done so we can save some money and break the social contract we have them signed up for? And when I started having all these questions and I started reading over that article and all that information that was put out online from the school district, it really spoke to the fact that there's really a huge transparency problem. This whole process has been very, to put it bluntly, not transparent, and it's leaving many in the community confused. And I'm sure there are many trying to make this as transparent as possible, but it's really important, especially since the school committee has almost no power, to be vehicles of communication with the community and really make sure that this information is getting out there in a way that people understand, with a huge segment of the community being Spanish-speaking, especially as that being their first language. It's really important we're getting that information out there to them in their language as well. Because a huge portion of the community that still doesn't understand is the Hispanic community. So I would really urge the receiver and the school district to really just put more time and really an effort into making sure people understand what's going on. So that my questions may not be legitimate. They may be rumors. They may be nothing. But this requires a school district and school committee to be really open with the public and really make this process as transparent as possible. So that's all I urge you to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else like to address the Southbridge School Committee joint meeting with council? If not, moving on to discussion of minutes, December 6, 2016, regular meeting. School committee members, are there any additions, corrections, or deletions to those minutes? If none, no further discussion. We'll move on to agenda item number 5, receivers' announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, Chairman Carrasco, Mr. Sanangelo, members of the Town Council, I want to thank you for joining us tonight to share our special education audit. But before I begin, I just want to take an opportunity to publicly congratulate Ryan Peters, who today was honored at Clark University at the annual Scholars Luncheon. He was the Southbridge High School senior selected this year, and I have to say it was one of the highlights of my year to sit with him and his parents and to see him to be acknowledged amongst his peers of all across Worcester County for the amazing things that he's done as a Southbridge public school student. At the luncheon, they gave us all a brochure, and it was filled with pictures of all of these high school seniors who are going on to do amazing things, who have accomplished amazing things already in their brief lives of 18 years. And every student had a picture and had a quote under it. And there was a particular quote from Abraham Lincoln that really resonated with me. And I wanted to share it tonight. He said, "The probability that we may fail in the struggle ought not to deter us from the support of a cause that we believe to be just." We're 5.5 months into the school year. I just want to take a moment and let that sink in. We're 5.5 months into this school year. And I want to preface the update by saying that everybody here in this room, in this community, everyone here at this table, I believe has the same goal, and that's to make Southbridge great. I don't know of anybody that would argue against the fact that everyone here wants to make Southbridge great. That is the just cause, that we all wake up every single morning and we come to school and we face the challenges and adversity every day. I know that I wake up very early every day and I drive a long way for that same just cause. And it's to provide our students with a world-class education. That's what we're here to do. And now we may not always agree on the means or the inputs, but I guarantee you we all agree on the end goal. We're all on the same page about what we want. And if we don't want a world-class education, we shouldn't be here. For all children, the Latino children, the white children, all students, regardless of their background, race, creed, gender, or preference. We are on the same team, and we need to reflect that. I encourage anyone and everyone to come to us with questions. Anyone on our administrative team, any one of our principals, come to us with any questions or concerns. Any constituent in Southbridge, whether you have children in our schools or you're a community member, you are welcome to call our office or stop by at any time. We will be available to get you any type of information that you want, to the best of our ability. I will meet with anyone. If you want to see our schools, if you want to tour it and see for yourselves, hopefully the teachers will not be putting on a show. But I want you to all understand deeply why we are doing what we're doing, how we are doing what we're doing, and it's important, and I agree with the need for transparency. So please, come and see the great things that are improving already due to the hard work of our teachers. And I just want to say that again, due to the hard work of our teachers and our staff who are coming in on their afternoons, on their weekends, to ensure that we do make this a world-class educational system. And it will be, because they are doing everything it takes to achieve it. So research has a lot of gray areas, all right? But the one thing that's been very clear, and regardless of any study that's been done on school and district improvement, there's been 3 key variables. One of them, high-quality teachers and high-quality instruction in the classroom, strong leadership in every school building, as well as strong leadership teams at the top. And what that means is a school committee and an administrative team who are working towards the same shared goals with the focus of improving the quality of classrooms for every single child. Those are the 3 main variables that have assured school district improvement anywhere in this country, a strong team approach. And I just want to emphasize the word together. And I want to say I appreciate many of the members here on our committee who have volunteered their time to be a part of our working groups, to be part of our committees, who have come in and are working with us and discussing their concerns, sharing with us some of the things that they have heard, asking us the hard questions that need to be asked. I appreciate all of their efforts. In February, I'm going to be giving a State of the Schools address to update the entire community on the progress that we're making on the turnaround plan and where we are in terms of our benchmarks and our priority areas. And I look forward to unveiling all of the hard work that has really happened because of our teachers and our administrators and our families and our students who come in every single day and work very, very hard to ensure that this turnaround is a success. We are blessed to be in a community that has provided such beautiful schools for our children, that has built such a beautiful complex on Torrey Road for our kids to attend school every single day. We're blessed. And a lot of people in this room are responsible for that. And I'm grateful that we have great facilities for our kids. So very quickly tonight, as part of my receiver's comments, I just want to ask Mr. Como and Dr. Townsell and Ms. Sweetman if they would come and answer some of the concerns that have been raised by staff member tonight, as well as by school committee members this week, and just clarify some of the things in the spirit of transparency. So, Mr. Como, Ms. Sweetman, Dr. Townsell.
Thank you. I'm pleased to have the opportunity to communicate the work that we've been doing at the middle school this evening, and we've been so immersed in the work and trying to make change that I don't feel we've communicated well enough everything that we've been doing. And so I think it's really important that we address these things. And when there's a lack of information, there are blanks that get filled in, and some of those are absolutely true, and others are not accurate. And so I'd like to speak to those a little bit. The students that we have in the middle school right now, even as Mr. Snyder said earlier, have been through so much, and they have been through changes in administration and lack of structure or changing expectations, and not to mention many of their struggles at home. And add to that being a middle school student, an adolescent. And I don't know how many of you could be paid to go back to middle school, but it's an extremely hard time in one's life. And they've been through a lot of challenges. And so now we are implementing new structures for students who've been through a lot, and it's going to take time to make those changes. And so, the best analogy that I've heard in regards to a middle school student is that they have their gas pedal all the way to the floor, and they don't have their brakes installed yet. And it is our job and our role to train them and teach them and help them to make the best decisions that they possibly can, and to learn how to interact in social situations and be the best contributing members of society as possible. But you have to keep teaching and reteaching. And so, in our school, we are made up of teams in the middle school. And with our teams, we ask the teachers, they know the students best in their small units, to create their own team discipline plans, because they know what works best for their students. And when that does not work for a particular student, administration steps in and helps in any way that we possibly can. And the one thing that I don't think any staff member can argue with is that I will, in meetings all of the time, say, the data, it doesn't matter if it goes down if it doesn't mean something. If we're not being honest about the data, then we're not helping kids. And that's first and foremost, is we have to put students first. And by trying to cook numbers or anything, I hate that term, but we're not putting students first. And I don't want to see them decrease unless it means that we are making meaningful change for our kids and that what we're doing is working. Our referral numbers have decreased this year in the middle school. Last year, for the total year, we were at 3,816 overall, and right now we are at 1,271. We're down from 21 referrals a day to 16 a day. And we've provided lots of professional development, and we have our new discipline plans, and we're really working as teams. And so I think that speaks to the decrease in office referrals in the middle school. So we're on pace to decrease by almost 1,000 referrals this year. We have Officer Torres, who was utilized a whole heck of a lot last year, and we are using him in much more positive ways this year. He's planning field trips for the students, he's bringing them to leadership summits, and he's more involved with overall safety than having to intervene with pressing charges against students or other issues in that regard. And so that's a really positive change for this year. There was something about food in the bathroom. That was true. We had food in our bathroom because this year, for the first time, we have received a grant to have breakfast in our classrooms. For the first 4 years that the middle and high school was open, you had 11-year-olds sitting with 19-year-olds eating breakfast in a cafeteria together. And there were middle school students who were not eating breakfast or participating in breakfast because they were afraid to sit with the high schoolers. And so now we have a grant that allows our students to meet with the same adult every morning in a small group where they check in. Every Monday morning you can find our students circled up with that safe adult, and they're checking in on how the weekend was, and they're breaking bread together. And yes, do we have some knuckleheads who brought food into the bathroom and made a mess because they're middle school boys? Yes, we do. And what we have done is put in place a duty schedule. So now there's an adult posted on every floor, and we have worked with the students to train them and teach them and keep reminding, as you do with middle school kids, how to behave in certain ways. We had an assembly at the start of the year, and I will be the first to tell you that it was embarrassing how our students behaved, some of them. And we looked at that and we said, we need to fix this. And so we looked at what was going really well. And one thing that went extremely well for us this year are fire drills. We had the kids lining up alphabetically and getting out of the building faster than they have since we opened the building, and in a structured way and in a quiet, safe way. And so we said, okay, if we have to keep teaching and reteaching, that's what we'll do for an assembly. And our teachers worked extremely hard to walk students down in single file lines and remind them of how to be respectful and why it's important to be respectful. And they worked so hard, we recently launched our classroom libraries and had an assembly. And I can't tell you the amount of pride that I had for our staff and for our students and how hard they worked. We had students get up and tell gut-wrenching poems from their lives, and the kids, you couldn't hear a pin drop. They were so respectful, and there was such a marked change. And change takes time, and it takes practice, and we're working really hard to do so, and we still have our struggles, but we are absolutely pushing forward, and it is better. It is better. And in regards to the assembly and having to teach kids over and over and remind them and constantly remind them and be there and be a model for them, there are some students who, it's not a one-size-fits-all program in a regular public school. And so if there's one bit of data that I can share with you that is really astounding and justifies the need for our Southbridge Academy, which is opening for second semester on the 23rd of January, we have 504 students in the middle school. 24 of those students we've met with their parents and the students, and we talked about the alternative program that is starting and made sure it was a fit. It's a voluntary program, so no one has to be in this program, and the parents and the students decided this was the best fit for them moving forward. Those 24 students out of 504 make up 42% of our office referrals, 42% of our office detentions, and 53% of our out-of-school suspensions. 24 students. We have not provided them with what they have needed for a long time, and we have also taken away from our other students. And moving forward, this will not change the middle school overnight by any means, but now students will get the supports that they need. Other students who have not received everything that they should from us and been pushed as hard as they possibly could will now have that refocused attention, and we'll also have administrators more readily available to support teachers and give them the supports that they're asking for and need to help them become the best educators they can for our students. And so, I've been here for 10 years, and I have watched our staff go through some challenges, and our students go through a lot of challenges. And at the start of the school year, I had our veteran teachers stand up, and I let our new staff know, these are our pioneers. This is what a pioneer looks like. And there were some staff members who felt they really wanted to speak to the changes that we have made and why they are here in regards to what was in the newspaper and just in the middle school overall. So I just want to thank you for your time and welcome a couple of our middle school teachers who are really on the ground doing the hard work.
Hi. I always know how short I am, and I have to lower the mic about a foot when I get up to the podium.
But I won't have to lower it.
Yeah, there you go. That's why we make a great team. I'm Susan Superson, and I am a 7th grade middle school inclusion teacher. And I actually asked Rebecca if I could come and share my surprise and pleasure as a new colleague in the system. So not only am I a middle school 7th grade inclusion teacher, I'm also the middle school special education chair. So I chair the middle school department meetings. I obviously am a 30-year-plus veteran of both private and public schools, and I have administrative experience as well. And I have been impressed as a new colleague with a couple of things that I would just like to mention and make sure that the information about these great things is out there and people are aware of them. So one of the first things is that we have an instructional leadership team at the middle school. And for the first time this year, that team has had representatives from the special ed department and the unified arts department. So this means that at those meetings, I, as the representative for special ed, am sure that I am able to bring the voice for special ed students to those meetings. And so that's a credit absolutely to Rebecca on that. This is the first year that our PTA has been firmly established. I don't know if all of you know about the Positive Behavior Intervention Support Committee, but this Positive Intervention Support Committee brings weekly incentives to students who make positive choices. So there are weekly rewards for students to make positive choices. They also provide teachers with guided lessons that they can implement to help reiterate those appropriate behaviors. This group also began the Backpack program this year, which is a program that supplies food to needy families in backpacks that go home in the backpacks every weekend. So those are some things to really be proud of. I can also say that there's been an initiative in the English Language Arts Department and the Humanities Department where we have implemented classroom libraries. So every single English Language Arts teacher now has a library within their classroom. The shelving was provided, all of the volumes were stocked, and the books are appropriately, culturally appropriate, and age and reading level appropriate for those students. So this is a huge promote for literacy right in the classroom. In addition to that, our special ed department, which I'm very proud to be a member of, has received a grant and worked really hard to receive a grant that will also be promoting literacy development, and this grant will begin to be implemented in February. I'm going to shortly turn this microphone over to a veteran from Southbridge, but I did want to say something to Mr. Schneider, and that is that I am disappointed in myself that I don't speak Spanish. I look at that as something that limits me in some way. I do speak French and a little bit of Polish, but I don't speak Spanish. But what I do speak and what you need to know I'm committed to, and I can tell you that the middle school teachers are committed to, is I speak the language of love and I speak the language of learning. And I'm committed to the vision for moving forward. That's why I came. Thank you.
That's a hard act to follow. Hi, my name is Missy Mulgrew. I'm a math teacher in the middle school. It's funny, I'm a veteran. I've taught here for 3 years, but in Southbridge, currently, that's a veteran. We are here in Southbridge because we want to be part of the change. I wouldn't have stayed, Sue wouldn't have joined us, lots of teachers are in the same boat as we are, because we think the work is valuable, and the positive change can and will be made. So some of the things that I already see, I just wanted to bring to your attention. The separation of the high school and the middle school into 2 distinct schools was huge. Thank you. We have 2 assistant principals. We have the alternative program starting on Monday, January 23rd, to meet the needs of students that we just can't quite meet in the regular public school. It's wonderful. We have a better schedule that's built with faculty and staff input for this year. I love my new schedule. We also have a committee reflecting on this schedule in order to refine it and make it even better next year so that it has the best possible positive impact on our students. We have advisories every morning. In those advisories, we're having check-ins. We're having a home base for the kids. It gives them a calm way to start their day before they begin the business of academia. During that time, we have breakfast in the classroom, as Rebecca already mentioned. So now more students are eating than ever before, and it's a great way to start their day so the head isn't on the desk because the blood is flowing. And these kids, many of them wouldn't eat if we didn't provide them that food. There's been a significant increase in home outreach, including home visits by administration, teachers, and the adjustment counselor, to name a few. And that's made a huge impact very quickly. We are grateful for their time, effort, and the connections that they make. Just this week, a parent of one of my students came in to shadow her student. We welcome any parent to come and do this, and getting a Cori check is a simple matter. The technology is better by leaps and bounds. We have Chromebooks that provide us the opportunity to become better at integrating technology into the student's education. And this is a critical piece to be competitive in today's world. Also, thank you, the wireless internet service is much more widespread and reliable. The Unified Arts, or Specials, is more exploratory for 6th grade and is in the process to become more student-selected for 7th and 8th grade once they've gone through that exploration. There's a sharp increase in professional development opportunities across the board, so many that I wish I could take advantage of, but my plate gets stacked quickly. We have a middle school consultant, Tom Burton, who's helping to guide our teaming concept and to act as a mentor. We still have our challenges, oh yeah, but we have many structures in place, and we are committed to this work. We believe in the positive changes that are happening and are possible, and mostly we believe that our students deserve nothing less. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, Pioneer family. I would like to talk about discipline in the high school. I know that was a concern that came up in the article, and many faculty members and school committee members have questions about it. I know there's thoughts about cooking numbers, et cetera, but I do want to say there is an approach. I thank the Lord for having a director of social and emotional learning with our PBIS and restorative practices approach that we have to addressing student discipline. And one of the things we were able to disseminate in the data was to separate major infractions from minor infractions. And that's why there's a drastic reduce in referrals to the office. For example, as of Friday, this past Friday last year, there were 694 referrals to the office. As of Friday this school year, there's 255 office referrals. So that's a 63% decrease, which is expected because we've identified major infractions that the administration should address. That's why that's a drastic drop. I agree with Ms. Sweetman. It makes no sense to have pretty data and what you see is not what's on the piece of paper, but to identify and distinguish. But to compare apples to apples, while the message is that compared to this time last year is better, even talking about fights, physical assaults, this time last year, as of last Friday, there were 36 incidents of fights compared to less than 10 this year. Now, I promise you, fights aren't happening in the hallways, and we're hiding that. You can't hide a fight. Cameras all over the building. That suggests that the place is ultimately safer. In addition, I know charges were pressed on students, police were called on students, in some cases students were arrested. Right now, 0 arrests, 0 students being charged with any crimes, which we put an immediate stop to a school-to-prison pipeline that kind of happened in different places across the district, or across the country, I'd say. And our resource officer, Officer Torres, is a phenomenal young man, but he's our last resort with regards to any level of discipline. Very last resort, we definitely deal with it administratively. I come from the District of Columbia Public Schools, and that was probably one of the best times of my life because during my tenure there, with Chancellor Henderson. It was the fastest improving urban district in the country. And when I served as the specialist of student discipline and school climate for central office, I oversaw 15 high schools, and I supported them with reducing suspensions across the district and across the schools. And I'll bring those best practices. In summer 2014, I was trained in Portland, Oregon at Safe and Civil Schools and became a trainer to deans and assistant principals of discipline in the secondary classroom and coaching classroom management. And just to put this in analogy form, you know, there's different approaches to discipline. In fact, December 2016, the White House put out a report from the Executive Office of the President titled, "The Continuing Need to Rethink Discipline." There's no answer there. But there's different approaches. If I put it in the analogy of football, some people say you need to throw the ball. Some people say pass the ball. At the end of the day, you want to gain yards. So the approach is different, and that can be debated, the approach that you take, but ultimately we're trying to get to the red zone, ultimately the end zone. And to support what was been mentioned earlier, I think we're all on the same page. We want to see results for the kids. At the end of the day, we want our students competing globally, period. So another thing I want to share, facilities vandalism in the building compared to last year. There were 11 incidents of vandalism. Right now, it's 6 incidents of vandalism. I'm talking about vandalism. And that's a 46% decrease. We're not hiding vandalism, we have work orders. No way to hide a busted window. No way to hide that and not report that. So I want you to know that we're going to try to do our best to be transparent and to communicate and articulate. Now, to share some stuff related to students, again, we want to make this world class. Bottom line, some of the pathways that we've created that you saw we mentioned over the summer, we have 36 students who are already signed up for the AeroVenture Institute, where they're going to take Foundations of Aviation Science and receive college credits through Adams State University. 24 of our students are signed up for Manufacturing Technology, which is a pathway we have with Quinsigamond Community College. 14 students are signed up with Culinary Arts and Machinery certification for BayPath, and we're still recruiting. We have one more slot for that. So far, 9 students are signed up through the Call to Teaching initiative of Worcester State University. You guys know we have a critical shortage in teachers. That's across the country. Definitely here in Southbridge. Who's dropping everything to run here? That's the reality. So a part of our priorities in our budget is to be able to recruit some of the best educators across the country, also regionally, to get them in and serve and love on children, which is what our staff is doing now. But we have shortage. We have a shortage. It's difficult. Let me tell you a story, for example. Beginning of the year, teachers just don't show up. Quit. First day of school, quit. That's a critical shortage. Math. Quit. We talked at the top of the year, we're on a hero's journey, and no one has, you tell me if I'm right or wrong, no one's ever jumped to the top of the mountain. It's a step-by-step process. Right now, this is step 5, week 5, month 5. We're still trying to gain yards. So we have a total of 83 students signed up for different pathways. We're committed to world class. Are incidents occurring? Absolutely. Are we better than where we were last year? No doubt. Incontestable data. But it's a working process, again, continuing need to rethink discipline. I come from the White House, and we're just going to keep working. Another good thing I want to share, though, our College and Career Center that we've added, we've had 285 visits to our College and Career Centers, 5 parental visits, and our Mass Ed Co-Counselor has visited 5 classrooms, and that's just going to climb. This is a hard job, there's no doubt about that. And I promise you, this is not the worst Southbridge has been. In fact, it's getting better. We're trying to gain yards. We're trying to be as best, work as hard as we possibly can for our students. I think we're on the right path. We are on the right path. Are there incidents? Yes. Are we addressing them and dealing with them? Yes. Is the approach the same? No. It can't be the same. Students, I graduated high school early 2000s. Students today are different from when I graduated. I think I just got a cell phone senior year of high school. Kids at elementary walking around texting me. No, they're not texting me, but they have cell phones, right? Kids walking in, so we have students who are connected to information, so the approach is different. The same way automobiles are different, our students are different. And the approach that are best practices, I strictly believe in battle tested, battle approved. Some of the same strategy, urban district of Columbia Public Schools, those same best practices can be implemented here. I do believe in the PBIS system. I do believe in restorative practices and restorative justice. I do believe in those things. I think over time, as we condition and build the capacity of our young people to the expectation that we're trying to get out, and the capacity of our educators and the approach that we're taking, we're all going to celebrate the success of our students. Thank you very much.
Excuse me. Just give you a few highlights of what the operations and maintenance has been doing this fiscal year. We hired a new technician in the spring. This gentleman is a plumber, HVAC, boiler tech. He looked at our boilers, completely tore them apart. Right down, cleaned them out, haven't been done for years, maybe not even been done correctly since day one. Right to the chimney. Took everything out, cleaned them out, serviced them, tested them, had the efficiency testing done on them. We're at 80+% efficiency on the boilers. A very long job, but it was well worth it. For the past 2 years, we've been working with National Grid for our lighting projects at the 4 schools that we have that needed new lighting, not the new school, but the other ones. And they were finally complete. And I'm seeing a 45% deduction in electrical usage in kilowatts, which is quite a bit. We won't see that money-wise for a few years. So we have to pay off the loan that we took with them, which is just showing up on our bill monthly. So that'll be, we'll see that savings in like 4 to 5 years. Then we'll start seeing the big deduction. So that'd be a big savings. Another thing we did was at the cold trade building, we have a 25-ton rooftop unit that serviced the old library that was demoed years back. It's rusted, it was leaking, causing problems. Something I didn't want to go to the town manager for, to ask him for $10,000. I got to pick and choose what I asked for to remove this from the building. So we did it in-house. My guys went up there, we demoed it, threw it off the roof, brought it to recycling, capped it, job done. Savings at least $10,000 that a contractor would have charged us for that. Another big savings is what the dishwasher at the cold trade building was starting to leak, and I think it was installed in the 60s. It was no longer useful. They needed a new one. It was going to cost food service at least $10,000 to have a used one installed. I called the town manager, asked him if we could go over to the old Wells building and look at the dishwasher was over there, see if it's something that would fit in our spot. And between our plumber and electrician looking at it, we said there's something we could do. So we hauled it out of there, made the swap, a little bit more involved. We had to rebuild the pump and make all the seals for it, but up and running, saved them $10,000 right there. I received probably at least 10 work orders for all the buildings every day. Buildings getting older, kids are kids, daily use. In the past 26 years that I've been here, I've seen classes go through in the old school that right from junior high to the end, they were just brutal, just one class. I haven't seen that for years. It's been a long time. I know at the new school, everything is new. It should be lasting for a long time. But some of the things that are being broken are, I feel that a lot of misconstruction issues. When you have a door that when it opens and it's an inch away from the wall, there's no give when you have 4 or 5 kids piling out of there at one time. If you see the hallways, you get 1,000 kids down these hallways daily. A lot of times there are 4 or 5 going through these doors. The doors are getting pushed open, they're breaking. So we found we've been fixing these issues with putting in door stops on the floor to stop them from continuing to break the tiles on the wall. They're not big. It's not, it's kids just running through the halls. Some of it might be done on purpose, but majority of it is not done on purpose. Kids in the hallways, if you think about it in your house, when your kids are growing up and the parents say, okay, well, we need to renovate the kitchen, we need to renovate the bathroom. They say, okay, once the kids move out, we'll do the renovations. I'm going to wait till they're out. Well, in my business, I renovate every year. Every summer comes along, we renovate the buildings because the kids are moving out and we've got new ones coming in. So, you know, all in all, what I'm seeing up there is nothing unusual or out of the norm. Once the kids come into at the middle school level, they're probably the worst, but by the time they get to high school level, they've grown up and they're out of that phase of, you know, being kids. So if anybody has any questions, be happy to answer anything for you. Seeing none? All right, thank you.
That's all for us, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Moving on to chairman's announcements. I planned on actually not saying anything tonight because this was a joint meeting of the council and school committee for the special ed presentation. But since there's been much discussion, now I will have to comment. If anybody out there doesn't think that I appreciate what you do and how you do it, I do care. I don't have a child in the school. I don't have a horse in a race. I just have my pride as a former alumni pioneer and as a community person that gives back as an elected official. And I do have an opinion, and I will express it. When a newspaper calls me and says, how's it going? Yes, we talk about all the positive things that goes on. But people have to understand, I get photographs shot to me from the building level by the kids of the damage of what's going on, the actions, the behavior. Some I cannot discuss on the air or with the newspaper. I was embarrassed by it. And the thing is, the standard of discipline, I differ greatly with the receiver as far as the standard of discipline. Overwhelmingly. But I wanted to schedule a meeting. The receiver called and we talked, and I was going to schedule a meeting. We're supposed to get together Friday, and I was going to take it to that level. But if we're going to talk about it in public, I'm glad that I could spur the discussion by a single newspaper article. To say that everything's bad in the school district, no. But don't tell me that there are not problems that are going on at them. And don't get me wrong, I don't get the same complaints from the elementary schools. But when you get pictures of walls and vending machines and kids fighting and somebody getting carted out, and I made it a point for 1 year. The 21st of January is the anniversary of the takeover by the commissioner. And I said, for 1 year, let's sit back, Scott. Give them the shot to do what they have to do. It's been 1 year, and I do have an opinion on a lot of things, and I'm going to constantly express it. People that call me, parents, teachers, your fellow colleagues, and a lot of students have a lot of fun with their technology, their phones, and everything that they're so well educated on. The stuff gets out. It's Southbridge, it's a small town, and it needs to be taken care of. Am I backing off of anything I said in that newspaper? Absolutely not. And to the comment of a previous speaker that it's the receiver's ego and my ego, no. It's not her ego and my ego. It's a difference of opinion. It's okay to disagree. You don't have to hate each other. I do not dislike or hate the receiver. I actually like her as a person. I don't agree with her in a lot of stuff that goes on. That's my job. Call it a check and balance. Call it the elected board. Call it what you want. We move on. We're going to move on. We're going to start talking about some of these things. Some of them maybe she'll acclimate to. Some she won't. But she's in charge, and I know that. I've always said since the receiver came into, we are potted plants. We have no power. I can't change anything. I just represent the people of Southbridge like I've done for over 32 years. And I will not be silenced by a few people coming to the podium saying, Scott this, they did that, and you said this. In 32 years, I've seen this chamber packed. And I haven't always been on the right side of the issue. But I stood up for what I believed in. And that's what I expect each and every one of you to do. I'm not mad at what someone says. They're words. We take them into consideration. Maybe we absorb some, and some we let go. The receiver and I are going to be sitting down soon, and we're going to be talking about these things. But I just want you to know, the facts were fed to me by teachers, parents, and students, especially the students. The pictures I got, a picture's worth 1,000 words. is worth a lot more than the words that were said up here. It tells you what's going on the ground in the middle high school. And we'll deal with it, and we will straighten it out. We'll get there. But this meeting here was supposed to be about the council and the school committee and the SPED report that we're going to be hearing right after the announcements. So I just wanted to make that comment to clear the air as far as where I stand, and we'll move forward. And I have no further announcements outside of it's a new year. It's time to roll our sleeves up for another year and do the same things and just do them better. And trust me, I will be everywhere all the time. I'm from Southbridge. I'm always in town, and I'm easy to access. That's why people call me. That's it for Chairman's announcements. Moving on to number 7, new business, special education review results.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to take an opportunity to introduce Dr. Lauren Katzman. Last year, when I arrived in May as the receiver here in Southbridge, the one thing that I worked with the State Department of Education to do is to look at our special education services and department and complete a full objective audit of special education services. I know that this is a high topic of interest in the community. We have about 22% of our student population who receive special education services, and Dr. Katzman brought a tremendous team of individuals with her and looked at various aspects of our service provision. And so she's here tonight to share that with us. I want to thank everybody for their indulgence tonight. And I do look forward to working with the chairman to address many of the issues moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Lauren Katzman, and thank you for introducing me, Dr. Singh. Let me see if I can get this right. Can you guys hear me? Okay? Yep. There is going to be a PowerPoint for those in the audience behind you. We did, as Dr. Zinga said, get called in before she was the receiver. So I remember being at a conference in DC, and Dr. Rodriguez from the state called me and said, we have a receiver coming into Southbridge, we're going to be starting this work, and she is convinced that special ed needs to be looked at. And I said, well, if a district is going into receivership, thank God she's convinced beforehand that special ed needs to be looked at, because you can't have a district that's struggling and special ed doing well. So that was brilliant on her part to start even before she was here. And then the interesting thing, and I've done a lot of these reviews, I run an organization called the Urban Special Education Leadership Collaborative, and we do a lot of these reviews, but also I've been a district leader and had reviews done on my old districts. I was a special ed director of Newark, New Jersey, and I was a special ed director of New York City. The difference with Dr. Huizenga is that as soon as we started, the first day, she called my team and I into the office when we were done and said, what can we do now? What can we start doing now? And so in every step of what we did and every recommendation we've made, there's already been progress prior to the report even being written, because there was a conversation the entire time around what can we do now. So the data that I'm going to show you is data we collected at the last summer and the beginning of the school year. The recommendations have been discussed through the year. We submitted the report in October. I believe it was October, and then this is a presentation on the report. I know that the meeting was running late, so I'm going to hit the highlights for you and take questions as the end if needed. Okay? So again, we're with the Urban Special Education Leadership Collaborative. It's a national organization. So when we do these reports, it's not just Massachusetts. We do work across the country. I want to frame what we do and how we think prior to doing this, just so you know the mindset going in and what we think special education is and should be. Special education is a service. It's not a place. It's a civil rights service. The whole reason for special education is because kids with disabilities, there has been lack of access for kids with disabilities. They've been segregated. You can think of it similarly to racial segregation. The same laws are on the books, or the same language, and they follow the historical progression of the civil rights legislation. So special ed is a civil rights legislation. It's a service to provide access. It's not a place. So you don't want to think of special ed as the room, the special ed room. If a particular service needs to be provided in a particular place, that's okay, but you think about what the child needs first to access. And just as a way of, as a way of showing this, you can see 3 photos up there. One to the left, you have 3 kids looking at a game, a baseball game. They're all standing on the exact same size carton, I think it's called a carton, and you see that there's a fence in front of them, that's the barrier, and because they all have the same access to the game, only one kid can see well, one kid can see less well, and one kid can't see at all, on the left. In the middle, what you want to do is you provide kids different points of access, different ways. So, for example, you look at me with my glasses on. If I didn't have my glasses on, I couldn't read this. This is a point of access for me. So you give kids different points of access. You still have the barrier there. Then all kids can see the game. That's good, but not the best. The best is the picture on the right is where you've done away with the barrier altogether. Why even have the wall there getting in the way? So all kids can see. So the idea of special education is to make it so kids' disabilities don't get in the way of their learning so they can have the same access as every other child. So special education should make it so kids with disabilities are achieving the same as kids without disabilities. Kids with disabilities can succeed as kids without disabilities can. That's what special education is supposed to be. So I just wanted to set that framework for people so there's an understanding of where we're coming from. And I just wanted to share with you that there's 4 sections of this study. One section is the district organization, and I'm going to touch on that very little because there's so much work already been done in this area. The second is the demographics around special education. In Southbridge, I'll tell you right now to preview that your numbers are extremely high. And that does not mean that you have more kids with disabilities. You have more kids classified as having a disability. The third area is about instruction. And so what I'm going to show you there is the academic achievement of your students with disabilities. And the fourth area is about cultural responsiveness. And I will preview also that what we heard people talking about around kids with disabilities was disturbing. And I don't say that lightly. So that will be the end of what we're talking about. I want to tell you that we collected data from the district. We collected data from the state. We interviewed staff, leadership, teachers, special ed supervisors. We interviewed families. So we did all of that in terms of our data collection. There are 9 recommendations, which you're not going to be able to read so well there, but that in the 4 areas I showed you, I'll go through these recommendations. So the first recommendation, and again, I'm going to go through these first 2 very quickly, is, I'll just show you this. We wanted to make sure, and in the beginning when we got here, the central office did not have special ed at the table, and within days, special ed was at the table at central office. So if you don't have special education at the table and people are not thinking about how does A, B, C, D, E affect kids with disabilities, then special education doesn't work well, and special education is at the table in central office, and that happened almost immediately. We also wanted to make sure that the special ed office was organized to be the most efficient, and I think there's still work being done around the organization of the special ed office, but we've had a lot of discussions, and one of my team members is now working with Colleen to develop a standard operating procedure manual, which will help organize the special ed office a little more as well. The other thing in terms of the central office organization is, and these are the 4 areas that we talked about within the district organization: human capital, which is staffing, I'll talk a little bit about that; SOPM, standard operating procedure manual. There is one that gives that gave the special ed supervisors guidance, but we feel like the district needs guidance, and so one of my team members and Colleen is working to create that to be available for the entire district. The data systems, special ed data and the district data weren't talking, so you didn't have good data coming in, and there's been a lot of work on connecting the data systems. So your data on kids with disabilities matches the district data, so you can actually have clear data to then work from to set your goals. And we also talked in our report about a funding formula. I think there wasn't a lot of thought around before Dr. Huizinga came in around the funding formula, but how you fund special education helps guide how special education is run. If you fund the more kids with disabilities, the more money you get, you're going to have more kids with disabilities. If you fund the more classrooms you have with kids with disabilities versus kids with disabilities in the general ed class with supports, you're going to have more classes with kids with disabilities. So we suggested that there's some ways to think about funding. But I just want to quickly talk about the staffing. And if you look at that chart at the bottom, on the left are special educators, on the right are educational assistants, paraprofessionals, I'm not sure the language people use. And if you look at the top, you have 32 special educators when we looked at the beginning of the school year, and you had 64 educational assistants. That next line is Southbridge staff to student ratio. So 17 special ed teachers per child with a disability, and 8 educational assistants per child with a disability. Now, if you look at that last row, that's comparison with about 60 districts across the country that we use as a comparison pool. And I wanted to highlight that the special educator student to staff ratio, the 14:1, is lower than what you have, but not that drastically different. But if you look at the educational assistants, across the country, it's 15:1, and you guys had 8:1. We said in our report that you were oversubscribing the use of educational assistants. There is a lot of research to suggest that paraprofessionals, educational assistants, are overused, and it's not an effective practice. You don't want to use one-to-one paraprofessionals because that creates a dependent relationship. It takes it away from the teacher. Imagine a middle schooler with an adult following them around. It's not a good practice for the child. You don't want the least educated adult teaching the most complex student. You want the teachers to be teaching the students, not the educational assistants. So we did say that you were using too many educational assistants, we believe. And we heard that not only from this data, but we heard people talking about it. And I know that there's been some work on pulling down the educational assistant number some. So that's our staffing. Let me just move past this, and I'm going to go right into your data, unless there are questions? All right, here's your data. I know it's going to be hard for you to look at the numbers, so I will just guide you to how to think about this. This is the percent of students with disabilities in Southbridge as compared to Massachusetts, as compared to the country. So if you look to the far right, kids on IEPs, and I'm not talking about students with 504 plans, there's a difference, but kids who get individual education programs, across the country, it's 12.9%. That number is going down. 12.9% is considered too high, and the number is going down. Massachusetts is 17.1%. Massachusetts is known around the country as having one of the highest number or percentage of kids with disabilities classified. I'm not saying Massachusetts has more kids with disabilities. I'm saying there are more kids classified, many inappropriately. So Massachusetts has been told by the government, look at your numbers. You have a high percentage of kids classified. Now look at Southbridge. Southbridge is higher than Massachusetts as a state. Southbridge is at close to 21%. I'm not saying you have more kids with disabilities. You don't. You have more kids classified, and there are reasons for that. And I can't give you definitive reasons, but I can give you potential reasons for that. Okay? So let me start breaking this down a little bit. This is by disability area, and I know it's going to be hard to see, and I wish I had a pointer, but let's see if I can figure out how to show this to you. Down at the bottom are disability classifications. So it says intellectual, communication, emotional, specific learning disability, autism, and other disability. So I'm just going to focus on 3 areas. In the middle, you see that high green bar? The green is the nation. That's specific learning disability. Across the country, about half of the kids classified have what's called a specific learning disability. Most of those kids, the issue is reading. Okay? And then if you look at the state, which is red, it's lower, and you look at Southbridge, which is blue, it's lower still. Now let's see where blue is high. Southbridge is high on that second bar, communication. Communication is speech and language and language. A lot of students in Southbridge are classified as having a communication disability. Now keep that in your head for a minute. We'll look at that in a minute. And a lot of kids in Southbridge, that third one, are classified as having an emotional disability. Both of those are extremely subjective disability classifications. They're subjective. So now let's just take apart one more. These are kids, and that language up there, ELL, English language learners. These are how your English language learners are classified, these are how kids with and without English language learning status are classified. And I'm just going to point to that second area, communication, with that very high red bar. Your kids who are English language learners are being classified with a communication disability inappropriately, too much. So that is an issue across the country and an issue here. And the issue is a valid confusion. People don't, I'm not saying anything here is blatant, I'm doing this because of I'm a bad person. People don't know how to figure out the difference between learning a language and a disability often. And there's a lot of confusion around that. And I think one of the things Southbridge needs to do is really get some guidance on how to think about disability versus language acquisition. So you have a big issue there, and that's a big reason why your communication is up there. Okay? So let me, I'm just going to skip a few that don't actually help with that. Where is this? Okay, let me leave the classification rates at that. We'll talk a little bit more about that emotional one there when we look at suspension rates. And I'll preview for you now that you suspend too many kids with disabilities. And kids with disabilities cannot be suspended because of their disability, but you over-suspend kids with disabilities. And I know the conversation has been on pulling down referrals, and the conversation I heard earlier about PBIS and the work at the middle school and high school is great, because when we looked at the data in the beginning of the year, there were too many suspensions for kids with disabilities, and that doesn't work. And suspensions of kids who are English language learners, and suspensions of kids of color. So I think that has to do with that that high emotional classification right there. So let me move on to look at graduation rates, okay? So I'm going to get into some of the data, graduation rates, and then your academic rates, your academic outcomes. So the blue bar are kids in Southbridge. The red bar are kids with disabilities in Southbridge. It goes 2012, 13, 14, 15, from the left to the right. You can see, just by looking without the numbers, that there's a drastic difference between kids with and without disabilities in terms of their graduation rates. And again, if special ed is doing what special ed should do, those numbers should be the same. Kids with disabilities can succeed as kids without disabilities. There are a very, very small percentage of kids with disabilities who have cognitive disabilities, and maybe not, but maybe those kids can't succeed in the same way. But the vast majority of kids with disabilities, if special ed is doing its job, that should be the same. Okay, let me skip to this. This is your MCAS scores from last year. And let me just make sure I get this right. The blue are students with disabilities in the district. The red are students with disabilities in the state. The green are all students in the district, and the yellow are all students in the state. So you can tell right off the bat that all students in the state and all students in the district are in general doing better than kids with disabilities, period. But if you look at the blue, which are kids with disabilities, You might notice that there's no blue in 2 grades. I'm sorry, what I also didn't say is that's grade 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10. In some of those grades last year, there were no blue lines, and those blue lines are students who are scoring at or above proficient on the ELL MCAS. So last year, in some grades in Southbridge, no students with disabilities scored at or above proficiency in ELL MCAS. This is math, same idea for math. Again, in some grades, no students with disabilities scored at or above proficient on the mathematics MCAS in Southbridge, which tells you that there's work to do around special education. I know this is hard to see. Are there questions around this? Okay? Okay. All right, that's your academic data. This is your suspension data. As of the beginning of the, or as of, this is last year's data, excuse me. Not last year's data, the year before, which is the, you need to know that this is 2014-15 because we had to get this data from the state because I couldn't get the data from the district. And I know that data systems have been improved drastically this year, but when we first got here, getting data was a big issue. So a lot of this data in particular we got only from the state. So the blue is all students, the red are students with disabilities, on the left is in-school suspension, on the right is out-of-school suspension. Students with disabilities cannot be suspended because of their disability. If they're doing something that is a manifestation of their disability, then there is by law a requirement to look at what's happening in their IEP and what needs to be done. There's also a law that after 10 days, a student with a disability must receive education, period. There's a zero reject rule for kids with disabilities. You can expel a child from school, but you cannot expel a child with a disability from education after 10 days. These are your 10-day rates for 2012, 13, 14, 15. Again, the blue is district kids with disabilities, and the red is state kids with disabilities, those who are suspended more than 10 days. I would hope that would seem unacceptable. Again, you cannot, and kids, if again, special ed is doing the job, kids with disabilities would be suspended at the same rate as students without disabilities.
Can you tell me what the units are in this graph?
Can't hear you.
Can you tell me what the units on this graph are?
What the what?
Units.
Yes, sorry. So the 1.7, it's the rates, let's see.
Is this
1.7% on the left, I'm going to look at the 2012, okay? 1.7% of students with disabilities, that first blue bar is at 1.7. Students with disabilities were suspended for more than 10 days in 2012 in the district. And on the right, 1.2% of students with disabilities in the state were suspended for more than 10 days, which I might be confusing because this is the percentage, that's the rate. Is that where you got?
Okay, yeah.
Because again, we were trying to pull data from different places.
I just didn't know if it was like per 1,000 or a percent or something.
Percent. Okay, how about some good news? This is called least restrictive environment, and least restrictive environment is where students are getting educated. So the idea I said before with special education is a service, not a place. You want kids to be educated in the general ed mostly, and anything else needs to be justified. You never need to justify a student in general education. You have to justify pulling a student out. So that blue bar is general ed, at least 80% of the day. The red bar is 20% or more out of the class. The green bar is 40% or more out of the class, and the yellow bar is 60 or more % out of the class. That top group is the country. So you see the largest group is the blue, the largest group in general ed, which is as it should be, and that number, they're looking to make it larger. The middle is the state, and the bottom is Southbridge. So Southbridge is exceeding having kids in the general ed class exceeding the country, which is a good thing. But then you map that with the academic outcomes, what's happening, what services are they getting in the general ed class is the question. They're physically there, but if you go back to the academic achievement data, they're not succeeding. So they're physically there, but with what academic supports? So that brings those two pieces together. This is in general, and this is in Southbridge by disability category. So again, the blue is in general ed, the most, going to the yellow in general ed, the least. If you see the bottom, it's specific learning disability. If you look at the top, it's kids who are classified with an emotional disturbance. Kids in Southbridge who are classified with ED, emotional disturbance, are segregated more than they should be. There is no data to suggest that kids with emotional disturbance being in a class together with other kids with emotional disturbance means that they're going to do better. They need support. And so your data is showing you that you need to look at where you classify, where you educate kids with disabilities. And I know there's an alternative program starting, and I know there's a lot of work being looked at and thought of around this. Again, this is last year's data. And then if you look here, this is LRE, or where kids are educated by race. And most kids are educated in the general ed class, but that yellow bar of kids in a separate school, more kids who are white are in a separate school, percentage-wise, kids with disabilities who are white. And what we did hear anecdotally from families is there are families who knew how to come to Southbridge and get their children out of district and sent to a private school. And that shows pretty clearly right there. Not that a private school needs to be better. It might be better, but it might not. Okay, let's see what else I've got. I'm going to skip all this and then talk about our last finding. And our last finding has to do with cultural responsiveness. And again, I said we were pretty concerned about this finding. Or actually, let me just back up one more thing. Hold on one second. I just wanted to back up to this. I forgot this. Some of our recommendations around instruction, I just wanted to make sure I said that there is a district-wide framework and plan. MTSS stands for Multi-Tiered Systems of Supports. They're doing this. The idea is make sure that there are systems of supports for any student to learn, any student who might be struggling at any level. So you think about it with reading. You have your reading program in the elementary school, and then you might have supports on top of that for a small group of kids who need it, and then you might have even more intensive supports on top of that for those kids who need even more intensive supports. And I know the district is working on these levels of supports for all academics, and I know that takes time to put into place, but I know there's a lot of work done on that. Recommendation 5 is that we also think, because of your ELA scores, and again, I know the district has been working on this, to really have a deeper focus on literacy instruction. We also, for number 6, wanted to make sure to bring those other academic scores up and making sure kids with disabilities have access in different ways through something called Universal Design for Learning, where those barriers, those fences are taken down. 7, that people work on the social emotional support. You guys now have a social emotional support director, and you're working on PBIS. This is the move the country is taking, and Southbridge is ahead of the curve on this. And number 8 is that we wanted to make sure that in the general class, make sure there's stuff going on. When the kids are there, that it's not just a place that they're getting support. So I want to make sure I said that. And then this is our last finding with cultural responsiveness. We wanted to look particularly back at these L scores, where we saw that kids with Ls are being over-identified as having a communication disability. We heard some really disturbing things when we were interviewing people around kids of color with disabilities. And I just wanted to share some of those with you and then tell you what our recommendation is around this. We heard a big disconnect between the staff and the community. Immigrant parents don't provide any structure. These are direct quotes of this is why the kids are not behaving. There are more kids with reduced IQ here because of how many families here are addicted to drugs. There's a drug problem all over the country, and That's not accurate. This one happens to be the one and I've been in this field for 33 years, and this one actually shocked me, and I don't shock easily. All the Puerto Rican families end up living together because they cannot afford their own housing, and they end up inbreeding. And if people are thinking like that, it's dangerous to think like that and then to go and work with your students. So we debated whether or not to lead with this or undergird this, but we decided to undergird it, and we think that perhaps the biggest thing you can do is to deal with some cultural responsiveness around kids of color and kids with disabilities in Southbridge. And that is a very, very hard thing to do. I mean, how do you do that? But there are ways to think about how to do that, and we've offered you a framework that we have seen work in different places and that I have used in different places, and researched that it is used and useful in different places. And this is a framework that we offer to you because it's such, how do you deal with stuff like that? It's just overwhelming and it's mind-boggling, but there's got to be a structure to deal with it. And our structure is the idea here to deal with things like that, these overwhelming ideas, these overwhelming prejudices, is to go at it in a number of ways at the same time. No one thing's going to work. And so the framework that has been looked at over and over is called the 4 frames. And the idea is if you attend to symbolism, you attend to the structure, you attend to the politics, and you attend to the human resources with anything you're doing, that you can actually create systemic and cultural change. And so the symbols, values, and cultures, so you can have, I've worked in a school where we're working on inclusive education. All means all is on the front of the door. Or I had one principal who said, I don't make a lot of rules, but in the teacher's lounge, you are no longer allowed to talk negatively about parents. That is now a rule. It was symbolic. People obviously could do what they wanted to do, but it was a symbolic rule. So symbolism is important, although that alone won't change everything. Structure, you need organization and policies. There needs to be a real deep dive into how kids in Southbridge are classified. You have too many kids who are English language learners that are classified. So what are the structures that need to be addressed? What about the discipline restraints? You need to address looking at the policies around that. The politics, I'm just being here and witnessing tonight, I can see a little bit of the politics of Southbridge. They need to be taken into consideration because without the politics and everybody who has political power being in the discussion, it doesn't work. And the human resources, what are the resources that you give the adults and the families to deal with so they can come together and change their mind? Nobody's doing this because they're bad people, but people need help in shifting. And so we've given a bunch of different smaller ideas in each of those areas. We've given some other resources to deal with cultural responsiveness. Here's some more resources that we provided. And that is it. These are just all of the recommendations. So did it in half an hour. If there's questions, we can take questions. And know that I just kind of went over the highlights, so there's more. Other questions?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Katzman.
You're welcome.
As a Puerto Rican, I'm highly offended that such a comment would come from one of our educators. But that's something that has to be addressed overall. You mentioned that when you got here in May, that the special ed department wasn't at the table. Can you explain that comment? Because
I don't mean physically at the table. I mean that there was, if special ed's going to work, special ed hits everything. It hits instruction, it hits discipline, it hits transportation, it hits funding, it hits data, it hits family engagement, it hits everything. So in some way, the structure of the central office must have special ed as part of everything. And so that was not apparent to us. And that was the first thing that Dr. Zinga grabbed and changed the structure of the central office organization almost immediately to make it symbolically different and structurally different.
I can speak a little bit to that. Special education was very siloed. It was siloed. It was very siloed. And the way that we've restructured special education now is that it's part of a teaching and learning team. So it's meeting on a regular basis weekly with the Chief of Learning and Innovation. It's part of a team that is meeting regularly with the English Language Learners Department. It's meeting regularly with the Social and Emotional Learning Director. So they're consistently weekly meeting so that there's no gaps, there's no disconnect between general education and special education or the needs of social and emotional learners and the overall academic programs. And it was very siloed when I got here.
My reason for the question is because when we see all this data, it's apparent that leadership was a problem because leadership did not do its due diligence in classifying students, making sure that students that had the disability were being met with. So I'm just, it's not shocking, some of these results. Because we've heard these comments before. I've met with parents, and as a frustrated parent myself, that's unfortunately no longer in this district. It's not something that I'm surprised, but I would like to see this report done again next year to make sure that we're making strides.
If I could just make one comment, I think, you could look at any department and look at leadership, but I think overall as a district, there was no systems in place. When one department is very siloed, at the end of the day, the buck stops with the superintendent. The buck stops with, the leadership of, the academic programs. And I will say there didn't seem like there was a lot of support for special education in terms of making sure that those systems, structures, proper identification processes were in place. So, I don't want to put the blame at any one person's feet, at any one department. I think that this was a real systemic issue, and as Dr. Katzman said, we have been addressing it literally from day one, actually before day one when I walked in.
And the special ed department has been following practices that they had at their fingertips and also what's surrounding them, because this is a Massachusetts and a national problem. I mean, nothing here is unique. Some of the comments are unique to Southbridge, but in general, it's not, unfortunately, that unique. The other thing is, and I should have said this, one of the things that most districts that are struggling in special education have an issue with is their compliance. You don't, which is really unusual, and that's a testament to the work here. You don't have a timeline issue, and that usually bogs up getting the real work done, and so you don't have that in your way. And that's a big deal, and timeline issues around special ed and all the compliance numbers usually bogs districts down, and it's very unusual that you don't have that, and it's really a testament to people using the processes that were at their fingertips to get things done. And so you have an open door to get things done like other places don't, which is impressive.
Mr. Chairman, has anybody figured out or approximately what we're talking about in dollars? Dollars that have been wasted, I think?
If it's for me, I can't hear.
Dollars.
What about dollars?
Because I keep hearing or reading the word over-identified.
Yes.
So someone's not doing their jobs.
So what?
People aren't doing their job. We have students in the program that shouldn't be there. Correct? Is that true? Yes or
But
no?
I don't know how you equal, I
no
don't
spin.
know that equals to people not doing their job. I think that equals people not having enough of the right information at their fingertips.
Right.
Usually when you refer a child for special education, you're looking for help. And what's happened in Southbridge prior to now is there's been nothing or special ed. And what the district has been doing is growing supports. But if you have nothing or special ed, the only way you're going to get help, you think, is to go to special ed. So that over-identification may be a lot of care. It may be an over-caring and not knowing what else to do. Not that it's appropriate, but I don't know that it's wrongly intentioned. I think it's rightly intentioned, but inappropriate. The outcome is not okay.
Do we have any idea what the cost is?
I'd like to the receiver, I've been involved, I've been out of school committee, and I've followed the changes in the special ed department. If the special ed department wasn't doing what they were supposed to be doing or over-identifying, why did you sign another 3-year contract with the sped director? Doesn't that fall onto the director's shoulders, the operations of special ed?
I didn't sign another contract. That was not, I didn't sign another contract.
Well, I know we didn't as a school committee, and we were supposed to, but I thought it took place afterwards.
No, that contract wasn't signed under the state's purview.
Okay. Cheryl, go ahead.
Will there be any actions, will the director implement anything to reduce the number of special ed students in that program? The PPP director. What actions are going to be taken by that department to reduce the number of students in that program that shouldn't be there?
Well, once the students, Dr. Katzman, if you could maybe help me with this particular answer. Once a student's identified for special education services, I guess, let me see if I understand your question more. Are you asking me, it's been said that we've over-identified students.
Right.
So are you asking me, how do we remove those students who are already on IEPs? Yes.
Okay, so I will say two things. You probably have a lot of students who look disabled, functionally disabled, who may not have a disability, but they're as, what is the law that says that the further you go, the wider the gap goes? So if kids who perhaps don't have strong reading skills, the older they get, the more they are functionally disabled. So you want to address the issue. So the issue, in my opinion, is there is an issue of over-identification, but the reason behind it is not negligence, in my opinion. There's been nothing else. So the one thing to do is what they're doing. What the district is doing is building those supports, building the literacy supports, building the behavior supports, hiring an ELL person, hiring a social-emotional person. Everything that you're saying, what can be done, is in process, and it's going to take some time. And you want to, forget who's classified, who's not classified, who's being taught to read, who's staying in school. Those are the questions that you want to ask. Then those numbers start to come down. And those numbers coming down are going to take some time, because you don't want to take away a support for a child who right now actually does need it, even though they may not have needed it in the first place. But right now, they do. Let the district build it up and let the kids get their support is one way. Another thing is you do want to look at the students who are on IEPs who shouldn't have an IEP. But again, if you looked at that LRE data, most of the kids are in the general ed class. What are they getting? I don't know. So you want to look at what they're getting and then start taking kids every 3, okay, I'm going to go all over the place, but there's another process. Every year, you have to reevaluate a child's IEP, an individual education program. Every 3 years, you have to, by law, reevaluate whether a child has a disability. You use those processes to decide if a child needs or does not need an IEP anymore. You don't take kids off IEPs until you've looked at every individual child. I think your issue is more around building your instructional supports than your over-identification. As you build those instructional supports and behavioral supports, the identification numbers will go down. I would focus that way than the other way.
But over-identification, it does cost extra money. True or false? It is costing.
You also get extra money.
Excuse me?
It costs, but you also get more money from the state.
Right, well.
So yes, it costs extra money.
Is it wasted? The money is wasted if someone's placed in special ed and they don't belong there. It's very simple.
It depends depends on what you mean by placed in special ed.
I'm not going to play word games.
No, I'm saying, seriously, it does that.
No, I
because
am
if
too.
you- If you have a person in a class, it costs a lot of money. If you have a kid with an IEP in a general ed class, it costs a different amount of money.
Right.
Not a lot.
Right, but
So
I'm
there's
saying...
a difference there.
Right, but I'm saying if someone is in one of those two programs and they don't belong there,
Sure, but you don't have a lot of kids in high needs programs here. Your kids are mainly in the general ed environment, which is what's going to cost you the least. You have, your cost has been paraprofessionals, educational assistants, and that number's coming down, because that was an inappropriate number. And that number is coming down, not because they're not good educators, just it was...
oh, no one's questioning the educated, believe me.
Sure, there's a money issue in terms of, I mean, there's other things we've talked about also, like every 3 years, you don't have to do all of the assessments. For example, that's a money, that can save you money. You don't have to do every single assessment. There are things to do, but I really would encourage you not to look at this as a monetary issue, because I don't think that's the biggest issue here. I think it's an issue that is going to come down as your instructional supports come up, and I think eventually you'll save money, but if you go at it to save the money, then you might get some unintended consequences as you're going at it, and I worry about that. So I would think of it instructionally versus monetarily, even though I'm a district leader and I get the money. I really do. I get the question, I understand it, but I caution thinking about special ed in this way.
Yeah, only, it doesn't, if it's local money, state money, it's still taxpayers' money.
Sure.
And it shouldn't be wasted. That's my point. Thank you.
Mr. San Angelo? No shouting from the crowd, please. Mr. San Angelo?
Thank you. I just want to explore this financial issue a little bit more, right? So,
And just let you know, we did not do a financial analysis, so I might not be able to speak any much deeper.
and I don't expect you to answer the question. I understand the dilemma here, but I think part of the problem is that, as you said, there's no middle ground. You have the special ed, people being forced into special ed. I think because the state incentivizes districts to almost add kids to special ed because you get additional resources, right? So the schools across the state, maybe even the country, are putting more kids in special ed because the state or federal government gives more resources for special ed, right? Instead of doing that, they should give enough money for the special ed kids and maybe have another pot of money for instance, ELL students to deal with that, because you're saying there's no program in between to help those kind of students.
There hasn't been. They're building it,
So,
but yeah.
so there needs to be something there. But I really wanted to go back to a slide you showed because I'm trying to understand it. You were trying to show the equality among students, and you had kids standing on podiums, so to speak, looking through a fence.
Do you want me to go back there?
I get the, if you would, so it's understandable if you can get right to it quickly.
It's almost there.
So I'm looking at these slides, and I get the first picture. I understand that children that have learning disabilities or special ed kids need support. I'm trying to grasp the concept of removing the barriers, right? Because in my mind, the barrier is the special ed need, right?
Is the what?
Is the disability, the learning disability itself is the barrier in my mind. How do you remove that barrier? You keep saying the best situation is to remove the barrier. Well, the barrier is the disability, and you can't remove, I don't understand how to remove that barrier. So explain to me how that's the best situation, because I just don't understand it.
I'll try with an example. I have two examples in my head, one about myself personally and one about reading. So let me see if I have ADHD pretty significantly. And I was the kid in the office, in high school. I was the kid getting in trouble. So, all right, so if you deal with a student who has ADHD, who's a behavior issue, me, and you deal with me in the same way as you deal with everybody else, so Lauren, sit. Lauren can't sit. So if you're making him sit and me sit the same amount, that's not going to work. So then we go to that second, and you allow me to get up a little bit more, right? Which is great. And so I now get up a little more, and it's better, and I can pay attention more, but still I look kind of out of place because everybody else is sitting. The last one is you have a class where everybody's just using their own learning style, so I don't look out of place. So you may be sitting, you may be over there with headphones. Everybody's using their own learning style, so there's absolutely no barriers, and there's many different options for me to do my assignments. I can videotape it, I can write it, I can do all sorts of things. I can use all sorts of options, and everybody can use all sorts of options, so there's no barriers for anybody. Whereas me being allowed to walk around, it's the same as everybody else, but I definitely look like I'm walking around. With reading, that first one, say I have dyslexia and I can't decode well, and just so you know, most kids who can't read well can understand extremely well, but just can't read those words well. So that doesn't mean they can't understand, but if you look at it that way, you just depend on me with dyslexia being able to read and only thinking that I know what I can decode on the page. I'm at a loss because my decoding skills are much lower than my thinking skills. You give me that second one, you give me a book on tape, and I can get it. That third one also teach me to read. So give me those skills. Even if you stop teaching to read after third grade, keep teaching me to read until the 12th grade. Let me keep learning how to read in college, and then I get all of it.
So let me answer, and this will be my final part of this question so I understand it, right? So I'm a student who learns better visually than reading, right? So you take away that barrier. I'm struggling with how a single teacher, even with an aide, can do that in a single classroom. Because you're telling me the student learns differently.
It's rocket science.
Right. So we have this whole big thing about putting everybody in the same classroom because we don't want to separate them. I just don't know how you can teach different students differently with a single teacher and maybe an aide.
So
how do
that's
you
where special ed
recognize
comes
those
into
two
play.
conflicts?
That's where special, in my opinion, and this is me not talking about Southbridge, this is just me talking, special ed's the best school reform you're ever going to find. Because if you use the special ed resources well, I've seen school districts and schools where using your special ed resources differently, you might have 2 teachers in many classes because you use your special ed staff differently. Or you use your special ed monies differently, and then you get this literacy program that you couldn't afford without the special ed monies. So if you use your resources differently, it's really, I mean, the notion of one teacher in one class with the door closed is not the best model. But special ed provides more resources. They don't have, as a special ed teacher, and maybe you're the person with a disability, I don't have to just work with this one person. As long as this person's getting what they need, and I'm making sure of that, I can work with a group of people. I can work with the teacher. So you can have a special ed service where I never look at the kid, but I work with the teacher and support the teacher. So it's building the capacity of the adults, and special ed can help build the capacity of the system to meet the needs of more kids. So I think you're right, it's really impossible with one person, but bringing those other resources, you've got a game.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Kessler, first of all, thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. Well, first of all, I was going to say thank you for coming here and presenting this stuff. What you seem to be talking about right now seems to be, it reminds me of the concept of multiple intelligences. And one of the things that jumps out to my mind is that how much do you see the issue that we see with special ed and other kids, not necessarily special ed kids, having what we are labeling as learning disabilities because of the fact that simply the way they think is not really addressed well in a standardized test-based system like we have?
I mean, yeah, imagine that the world thought that art should be tested and art was the most important thing, and
right.
Period, I'd be in a special ed school because I can't draw to save my life. So it means what we privilege and what we look at, and that type of intelligence that we look at,
right.
If you look in countries like war-torn countries, you're not going to see kids with learning disabilities because they're worried about can a kid walk to get out of their home to get to school. So it's
right.
very, very culturally based what we look at. Yes, I think so. But also, if we did education ideally and perfectly, which nobody can do, but say we were in the ideal and perfect, there'd be no need for special ed because everybody's needs would get met. So yeah, you're right. And multiple intelligence is, like the schools I've seen that do special ed well, do general ed well, kind of like special ed, thinking about how everybody learns and working with all sorts of people. So your best combination of adults, back to that question, is a special ed teacher who's got this kind of knowledge and a content teacher who's got the reading or the math or the science knowledge together is the most amazing people to plan together, or groups to plan together. You don't even have to have them physically there all the time, but to plan together to meet all in types of thinkers and learners.
And earlier you were talking about the fact that for some reason our town does not have compliance issues, which when you said that, that to me that struck, what that made me think of is that it seems to be that if we have no problem getting the reports in and the numbers in and all that stuff into the state, but that the schools themselves are not teaching the kids right.
And that's not a special ed issue, that's an issue.
In general, yeah, exactly. And so my concern there, when you mention that, it makes me think of the idea of how much of that has to do with the fact that some of our better teachers are spending, like in your report, you mentioned that some of the better teachers are doing the team lead stuff, which is they're providing little or no direct services to the kids. How much of that is that we're having our teachers spend too much time collecting nonsense data rather than actually teaching?
I think that we pose that as a question for you to look at. I mean, I think that's a question for you to look at. Yeah, I mean, the fact that your timelines are good is great, but what's the cost? I don't know.
Any other questions? If not, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 8. Item 8, members forum. Any members have any comments, questions?
I've got a couple of things,
Mr. Bishop?
Through you to the receiver. I understand we have a receiver's list of educators that are not meeting. Could you just for the audience and for myself, what is the criteria that you use to put somebody on that list? Is it MCAS data? Is it I don't know? Are they too fat? I don't know. Whatever, I would be on the list if it was too fat.
Being too fat was not a criteria,
Oh, thank
Mr.
God.
Bishop. There was multiple criteria that were used to identify a teacher to be, or any staff member to be on the receiver's review. It could be anything from their contributions to the professional culture. It could have been the number of referrals that they wrote. It could have been the assessment results that they got on the state exam. It could have been their attendance to work, excluding any type of FMLA. It could have been results on local assessments. A variety of data points were taken on every single staff member, as well as any personnel action, disciplinary action that had been taken on a staff member. Any evaluations that had been done over the course of the last 3 years was taken into account. So multiple data points was taken on every single member of the staff in every single school, and we looked at multiple points. No teacher was identified for one in particular data point and put on the receiver's review. We began with 28 teachers on the receiver's review. I believe we're down now to 18 teachers that either that are continuing on in the process that either haven't resigned or they have submitted papers for retirement.
And I'm going to assume that all of these data points were articulated clearly to each of the individuals.
If a teacher went to the principals, they were instructed to articulate those data points clearly to the teachers.
All right, so with 18 people, I'm concerned, as Mr. Tomo is, about dollars. I pay taxes in town. Currently, I think, and I'm going to be asking Mr. Didi my usual question, where are we with the unemployment figures? What do we anticipate as a financial impact of adding potentially another 18 people to the unemployment rolls?
Well, we don't know what, I can't speak to the financial impact. I can let Mr. Didi speak to that. But we don't know, number one, whether or not all 18 teachers are going to be dismissed in accordance with the receiver's review. My hope is that all 18 are going to continue through the process. I also want to be clear, I think that there has been some misinformation out there that the receiver's review process, the first round will be complete by the end of February. And so a determination will be made whether or not those teachers, one of three things will happen: whether a teacher is dismissed, whether a teacher continues on through the process to the second round, or whether a teacher is removed from the process altogether, meaning that they've been reviewed, they've been observed, and they're deemed to be a teacher we would like to continue to employ here in Southbridge, and they're taken off the receiver's review. And so then a second round occurs with those teachers who are continuing on. We just can't make a determination at this point, and they will get further observations done throughout the spring, and then a determination will be made at the end of the year. And then the receiver's review process is over. There will not be another round of teachers that will go through the receiver's review. This is the one and only receiver's review. The other thing that will happen too at the end of the first round is those teachers who have been identified as teachers who are recommended for dismissal, they will not be automatically dismissed. They will be recommended to a panel for review, and that panel will make a determination and a recommendation to me, and I will make the final determination on whether or not a staff member is dismissed. So there are multiple steps here. Again, this isn't a simple, you get observed 3 times between now and the beginning of March and you're automatically dismissed. There are steps afterwards.
And who will be on that panel? Is it local or is it external?
It's local.
It's local people?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Bishop, if I could just tail off your question to the receiver. If you have a 30-year teacher or a 29-year teacher and she's retiring in June, what is the logic of putting them on the watch list? That's probably the only thing that bothered me greatly. Holding people accountable, putting the best teacher in front of the classroom is what everybody wants. Improve the ones we have or get better ones. But when you have teachers retiring in June and they go onto a watch list, it just didn't make sense to me. And if you could explain that for the public, because that's been a big discussion by the public to me, asking me.
Absolutely, and thank you. It's a great question. And this is conversations that I've had with the union president. We've been working very closely to sort of discuss the reasoning for this. And the main reason is that a teacher, for example, last year we had teachers submit papers for retirement, and then all of a sudden at the end of the year they pulled their retirement papers out and said, you know what, I'm not going to retire. In fact, I'm coming back next year. And so since we did have that happen and the letters that were submitted were not irrevocable letters of retirement, we put them on the list and continued them as if this could be in fact the case. So in working with the union president, we've had many discussions about what about those people, and so we've decided if they submit a letter of irrevocable retirement, they will simply be observed in the first round, and if there's no major concerns regarding their instruction, and they're not, a safety issue to children, then they will simply be removed and they will go off into the sunset through the end of the year. That was the agreement.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Bishop, I'm sorry.
I've got a few more things, but I'll swing by and see you.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
It's late.
Okay.
Mr. Steves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Dr. Huizenga, I wondered, going through the report, one of the things that it brings up is the shortage of substitutes. And I was wondering, I'll admit I don't see like the ads on a regular basis, but I don't recall ever seeing any ads for seeking substitutes in Southbridge.
Right.
What are we actually doing to recruit them?
So that's a great question. Substitutes are a problem everywhere. I sit on the board of the SWET Collaborative, and it's a common discussion. Everyone is having difficulty getting substitutes. We've posted on School Spring for substitutes. We've had administrators coming in on Saturdays interviewing for substitutes. Every district in the local area is drawing upon the same pool of subs. We even had a meeting with Kelly Services, our Chief of Learning and Innovation, Dr. Marinell, and our coordinator of humanities. They met to discuss possibly even using Kelly Services to bring more substitutes. It's just been a significant challenge. Not only is there a teacher shortage, but there's a substitute shortage. Right. But we are working at it.
Any other questions, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Just curious, we've heard a lot about the culture and different family situations and such, and we heard that a lot of home visits have been done and other activities to reach out. Do you have an ongoing plan in terms of continuous engagement with parents? Do you have something in place that is, how do you continually engage, regular basis with the families out there, with parents?
Right.
do we have something, is there a system now in place? Is there
So
a
family
plan?
engagement is our fourth priority area in the TAP, and it is the one area that we really need to create a formal strategy around. And it is something that we're going to be working with local universities and experts in family engagement, particularly in high poverty areas, and in areas where the community has been disengaged. And we're going to be looking at that this spring and into the fall of next year.
Okay, so working on that. But in the meantime, what would you say is your best reach out when you do try to reach out with information to families? I mean, what means are you doing now? What efforts are you putting towards that now to engage families?
So, and we have totally revamped our website. We are using the one-call system. We're, using sending information home in backpacks. I will say this, in my time here in Southbridge, when I have gone to events at the schools, particularly the elementary schools, I will say the engagement is tremendous. I mean, the number of parents who come to events for their children here in Southbridge would rival any suburban district anywhere. It's impressive. And so that begins to dwindle just like in every district when you get into the middle and high school level. But what we need is just a greater strategy for overall engagement, not just when the students are performing, but also to draw people in and also for us to get ourselves out into the community and really engage in various ways. So we are going to be working on that.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Gus?
Thanks again. Also, earlier, Rebecca Sweetman was talking about the alternative program, and I was wondering when she mentioned that about the 24 kids that are going into the academy, it made me think of the concept about the fact that, and I was wondering, I wish she had expanded on this, but maybe you can. What kind of wraparound services are these kids getting when they're in this program? How much outreach is there into the homes to help them address the issues at home that are often underlying concerns with their education?
I'd like to acknowledge through the chair our Director of Alternative Services, Melanie Gallant, and she can answer that question.
I apologize. It was very difficult to hear from the audience.
Okay. What I was asking was, referring to the alternative program, when Rebecca Sweetman was talking about it, she was talking about it a little bit. It made me think of the question of what actual wraparound services are available from the schools, and how much of the schools are actually going into the homes to actually address some of these underlying concerns that are impeding these kids' education.
Certainly, I can speak for the program itself. In the alternative programming, what we do have is we have a clinician that's hired from Harrington Hospital, so there'll be wraparound services that'll be directly connected for therapeutic and behavioral support, so that's one piece. I have made home visits along with the assistant principals to outreach to the families and to meet with the parents and the students for that. We plan on also doing home visits and on-site visits as we progress through. We're doing weekly communication updates with our parents. So the whole premise behind at least our academy is to, one, get to know our students, two, outreach to the areas where the students are involved. I do have students that are court involved. I've already met with the probation officers and are in collaboration with them for ongoing services. I'm also in collaboration with a committee that I have formed in the community where I have U Inc. as well as members from Harrington Hospital in various capacities, and we'll be meeting monthly. So I have done some outreach within the community as well as looking at the individual students and what wraparound services they already have and provide, and to be able to continue those services, as well as working with families and communities for students that potentially will need additional services once we get them in the doors and work with them. And one of the beauties of this particular program is because the program is on the smaller scale, we have the ability to make that happen if necessary.
Any other questions?
You're welcome.
No further questions? Go ahead.
I just want to make a comment, and I want to thank the educators that are here and that are working hard on a daily basis to try to change our district, because I think, at the end of the day, we may sit up here as town leaders, elected officials, appointed people that have been hired to do the work, but at the end of the day, you guys are the real heroes. You guys are the ones that are dealing with our children. And I truly want to appreciate each and every one of you, and I hope that, you know, you continue to give your best effort, you know, regardless of who's saying what is being said. Continue to take pride in your degree and in the work you do, because at the end of the day, all that matters is impacting one child, and one child can change a whole generation. So, you know, when you go to work tomorrow morning, you know, just look at one of those kids and understand that that kid can change a whole generation and impact your generation, the next generation, your children, your grandchildren. And again, I just want to thank you for the work you do. And I, you know, on behalf of, I'll say it, on behalf of the town council, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? If not, moving on to adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Do I have a second? Motion and a second. All those in favor? Opposed? We're adjourned.